Okay, so this part of the tutorial will involve declaring some of our variables that we'll use in Android. So these are going to be global variables so that we can use them, well, I mean global in the scope of our class, so that we can use them in any function in the class, okay? Because we'll be needing to store them and then modify the values and do a bunch of stuff with them later. So we're not going to declare every one of the variables we'll use, but we'll declare the ones that we need right away, or the ones that are pretty obvious that we'll need them. Okay, so these are going to be stuff like our lists of calculations, lists of missing variables, and a bunch of doubles to contain the numbers to perform the calculations. Okay, so now it's time to start implementing some functionality, and the first step to that is going to be declaring and initializing some variables. Okay, so I'm going to do this tutorial a little differently. Usually I go through step by step by first initializing or declaring all the variables, then initializing some, and then we do kind of like the skeleton of the methods. But this time I'm going to kind of do it all in one go. So I'm going to implement some methods each time, each section, because this one's a pretty complicated app, and I think it's easier to understand the flow if we do it this way. Okay, because there's going to be a bunch of helper functions that won't really make sense until the main function is implemented. So I'm just going to declare a couple variables right now, and these are just going to go up here in the class, but outside of the on the onCreate method. So the first is going to be a string array, and this is going to be the list of missing variables. So this is going to contain the 5 variables, and we'll choose one that is missing. And this one is going to be the list of calculations. Okay, and so I'm going to go ahead and initialize these on the onCreate method. And the onCreate method is a good place to initialize them because these we want to be loaded right away as soon as the screen loads up. And the onCreate method basically stores or loads everything that, or it basically displays and initializes everything that will be loaded as soon as the app starts. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and do this. We're going to say a list of missing variables is a new string array, and it's going to contain these values. They're all going to be strings, of course. The first one's just going to say choose a variable, choose missing variable. Okay, just because I want that to be displayed on the front of on the first thing of the spinner. So we can do this in two ways. We can just kind of have them side by side like horizontal, or we can have them vertical, and I personally kind of like to stack them vertically. It doesn't really matter as long as they're between this and this brace. Okay, and so the second one will be, we'll have a final velocity. Third one will be initial velocity. The fourth one will be acceleration. Fifth one is displacement, and sixth one is time. Okay, and so there we go. That's our list of missing variables initialized. So just going to save it. So these 5 variables, so final velocity, initial velocity, acceleration, displacement, and time, are going to be the 5 variables that appear in our equations, and not all of them appear in every equation, so yeah. So we need to be able to choose missing variables from here. The second step is going to be our list of calculations that we're going to initialize, and this is also going to be a new string array, not a strong array. I'm just going to put that there. Okay, so our first one is going to suggest that we choose a calculation. And our second one is going to be the first of the actual calculations, and that's going to be d equals vi times t plus 0.5 times a times t squared. Okay, so this is just one of the equations, and each of these is just going to be an equation. So if you want to go back and look at that page, feel free to do so. It is, I just basically Googled kinematics equations, and I believe it was the first link. Okay, and the third one is going to be Vf equals Vi plus A times T. And our final calculation that we could use is d equals 0.5 times vi plus vf divided by, or times t. Okay, so this is our list of calculations and the list of missing variables initialized. And we're just going to add a few more variables to the variable declaration, and there's going to be more added later on when it's more clear when we'll use them, okay? So just know that in order to perform the calculations, we'll need some variables that are going to be doubles. I'm not going to use integers because there will be decimal places, and a lot of there's going to be a built-in math function that we'll use, and that takes in only doubles, not floats. Okay, so there'll be variable 1. And these are just kind of saying, first of all, we'll need a, oh, that's not what I want an E there. Okay. Yeah, so these are basically going to store inputs, so variable 1, 2, and 3 are going to be the known variables, and the final answer is going to be the unknown, and that's the one that we're going to have on the left-hand side of the equation. It's going to be the one that's being printed out. Okay, and so that's all we need to know for now. There will, like I said, there will be more variables added, but we'll add them when we use them. Okay, so next step will be to implement some of the functions, and the first of those is going to be implementing the spinners. Okay, so this part involved declaring some variables in Android. So we declared only the obvious global variables, and there will be more to come, but we'll implement them in due time because it's not necessarily intuitive as to why we need them, and I think this is more indicative of the actual software design process. And we're also going to initialize a couple of our lists. So, and this is going to be the lists of calculations and the list of missing variables to put in our spinners, because we'll need those right away. So you should start to think about how we're going to use these variables and maybe what other variables might be involved. Okay, so it's a little complicated, but we'll get to it eventually.